in. Producer Alex, we are going to go through a few of the Monday news items. You brought a few things to the table this morning, Alex. We're just past Father's Day.
Yes,
and
we are.
Have a theme, Father's Day.
Yeah, it's kind
what
of
do you got for us?
Thing. Yeah, it's really talking about balancing career and family, and focusing on dads specifically, and a lot of dads in leadership roles, whether you're an entrepreneur or an executive in a business or senior management. I think this is really for you and for those people. How do you balance being a high performer in the workplace, being a father, whether it's to young children or children that are a little older, but just being a dad, and spending the time and energy with your family, with your kids, but also how do you balance that with being this high performer and top earner, maybe potentially for your family, and spending the time with your family and your children. And so, yeah, I think there was two articles. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's a very tough subject.
Yeah.
So we read through the articles. One of the authors was the CEO, founder of Strider Bike, Ryan McFarland. And this is what I'm going to share with you. You have a young boy.
Yes.
If you don't buy a Strider bike, you are going to make yourself miserable.
So if
you need to get one. It was the greatest invention that I would put it up there with the light bulb. Like, it is that revolutionary. If you've, ever tried to teach kids how to ride a bike, and those classic, you have training wheels, and it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And when you watch kids learn how to ride a bike, and they, like, at one point we had a bike and it was broken, and I saw my son, like, a pedal fell off, and he loved riding it around as a scooter. And so when we got a Strider bike, we actually had a difficulty getting him off of the Strider onto an actual bike because he loved it. He was doing tricks on his Strider bike and loved it. Cool. And so he had first had training wheels. We got him a Strider. He loved it. And then the first day he gets on a bike and rides it, no problem at all. Like, wow. Easy. And so it is one of those, as a parent of kids, get yourself a Strider bike. They are amazing. There's other versions now, but since we're featuring Ryan as part of our conversation, go get yourself a Strider bike. This is not an ad for Strider bikes. If they want to choose to sponsor, that is great. That is fine. Yeah, I would gladly, if you catch this, if somebody shares it with you on LinkedIn, please reach out. We would love to have you as a sponsor of the Impact Driven Leader podcast.
And come
but not us today. Yeah, totally. So this discussion about dads, being a dadpreneur. I know you had another article that you shared with me that was from a CEO of Tim Allen, CEO at one point of care.com. Yeah. And he shares a story about how when his twins were born,
yes,
he was walking into the hospital on a conference call as his wife is in delivery.
Yeah.
So I don't know how involved you were with your wife. You have two kids, Ashley, in the birth, how, present you were. But I'm going to share my experience.
Go ahead.
And I'm not sharing this because this is ideal. I'm going to share this because I've evolved and I can speak from it. So our oldest was born. And at that point in my life, I had actually left the job that I had, started my own business when my wife was 6 months pregnant with our daughter. And so when our daughter was born, she was born on a Monday morning, and go to the hospital early in the morning. She's born at like 8:30 in the morning. We ended up getting out of the hospital 9:00 that night. Everything was fine, no complications. So the next morning, my wife is one of 4 girls. And so 2 of her sisters and her mom came to see her and the baby. So I left to visit clients. I'm like, what am I going to do? Am I just going to sit around here? It doesn't take 5 adults at that point to hold a baby, change diapers. And for now 17 and a half years, I have lived with that badge of shame from my wife or others. And in some part, it's tongue in cheek, some parts not. Mm-hmm. And so understanding the struggle understanding the struggle as a dad, and a part of it I justified. It's like, I don't want to sit around here. I got stuff to do. And part of it is, and one of the notes that I wrote down, and yourself having your own business, looking at this is like, there was no one else that was going to do my job.
Yeah.
Like, I had to do it. And there was stuff that, my clients knew that my wife was pregnant, that, we could be going into delivery, but I'm not sitting here justifying it, but the cows didn't care. The cows didn't care that my wife gave birth at 8:30 in the morning, and the next day when they wanted their, diet adjusted, when they needed things done, they didn't care. And that's one of the great challenges and struggles, I think, as a parent in different roles in different businesses. It's fine to say, I get to take off 12 weeks paternity. That's so foreign to me from growing up on a farm and working in agriculture, where it's a struggle.
Yeah. And
so
no,
I'd love you to share kind of your experience with your kids.
Yeah, no, I think thanks for sharing that story. And everyone probably has something similar, whether you work for yourself or you work for a business, because within the business, maybe the culture, right, is like in that story that Tim shares. He basically says, I was walking through the hospital as my wife's in labor on a conference call. And you could just imagine yourself like, oh yeah, Chip, Diane, we got to go get this deal going. And you're like, wife's giving labor and I got to focus. My story was, I was very present in the birth and being present in the room and all the way leading up and the day after. It was the days after for me that we're at home. We have one. We didn't have twins to start. We had our little boy, and we did have, I think, a smart decision. We had a doula, so there was somebody there, and I kind of had that similar. It was like someone's here with my wife, helping her. And all I had to do was go upstairs was my situation. Like, just go upstairs, go in a meeting, and everything's fine. And it worked out. Like, I would say for the most part, I was very present. I was there. Maybe there were times where I'm like, I'm going to go run to the grocery store and, maybe be gone. Or I'm trying to think if I had to go to meetings anywhere, but maybe I don't think I did. But I think I was pretty present, and because my wife she's never brought it up before, so I don't think she's anything I did wrong. But there are a lot of people that I know. A gentleman that I'm working with now, as I consult, is was supposed to be on a paternity leave. He had up to 3 weeks, and this is the problem: is that they should take up to 70% of men take less than what is their allotted amount. So most people, they're just like, no, I need to get back, and they get back. And it was a week, and he's right back at it. And it's just, I don't know if it's a culture thing. It's that mindset like you had, Tyler, where it's like, people are here, everyone's fine, the baby's fine. But should I just be present for a week or two or three and just disconnect?
It's hard. And, I want you to think back in those instances. And for you, it was more recent than me. But part of, and again, this is open conversation of, for me, it was like, man, especially in my first, I'm not working for a company. I have my own business and the push to provide. And, there's also a point, a lot of my clients, they had kids. There was going to be a lot of grace. There was grace in it. And I had a flexible schedule. Like, one of the things, I had a coworker, a peer of mine, and one of the best suggestions, guidance he ever made. And if you're listening to this and you're a soon-to-be dad, or maybe you're a parent and, soon-to-be parent, is he said, never miss a doctor's appointment. And so one of the things that I was adamant about during each one of my wife's pregnancies, 3 of them, is to never miss a doctor's appointment. And there was an instance where I missed one, and it was out of my control. I forget exactly what the circumstance was. It was just completely, it was unavoidable for whatever case. And my wife actually got some questionable news. And there was one of the genetic testing things that you do for our youngest son. And there was a chance that he was going to be born with Down syndrome. And so she had to be given that information alone. And, that was one of the greatest suggestions I was ever given. Doug DeGroff is his name, a very good friend who gave me a lot of wise, sage advice like that. And it would just, I think back in those instances, he was fine when he was born. I was deaf, but he was fine when he was born. That's a whole different story.
Is he deaf
He's not
now?
deaf
No.
today.
Yeah,
No,
I was
he
gonna
can
say.
hear. He's actually the son that can hear. The other one has challenges. Anyways. And, but it was that, to be in that spot to where, my wife is dealing with challenges by herself and you're not there to help. And again, sometimes it's in your control, sometimes it's out of your control. But I think the bigger question we have today is, in society, do we embrace this idea of parents being present, or do we say, hey, no, your responsibility is other places?
I mean, that's you just reminded me of something. I went to, so for our first, I went to like a lot of the ultrasounds and a lot of the doctor's appointments. Some I did not go to because I want to say that was like right at the tail end of COVID, and there was like some things I couldn't go to, and I didn't. But for our daughter, our second, who's 10 months old now, I want to say I didn't go to many doctor's appointments. I don't know why. I can't recall now. Time's been going by fast. But then also post doctor's appointments, I never go to those.
Okay.
And I just typically they're during the day. They're during the day, and I'm meetings. And so my wife's never been like, why aren't you coming to these? Or you need to come. Like, it was just like, I'm going to take him to the doctor. And I'm like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she gets back and I was like, how did it go? And she tells me.
Yeah.
And then that's it. It wasn't like, And so, but that's a good point. Like, that's something to be aware of. First and foremost for me, like that's something maybe that I should be a little more like, hey, do you want me to come? Instead of like, okay, you're going and I'm home.
Well, and I think again, the big question is how are we, in the midst of everything else, leading organizations? Mm-hmm. And again, this is, from a perspective, Ryan McFarland, the CEO, founder of Strider, sharing his experiences, being a dadpreneur and having kids involved, being involved in that process, to Tim Allen, the then CEO of Care.com, when he wrote this article talking about making some bad steps. And he, shared the numbers that you shared, is that, 70% of people would change jobs to spend more time with their kids.
Wow.
And when we think about that in today's age and challenge of leading, are we looking at this as something relevant, or that's so far outside of the realm from a culture, from a human resource, from having anything to do with the bottom line, that we totally just ignore it? And I think that's one of the, the pieces today to discuss is this something that's just a quirk, millennial quirk? Okay, I'll frame it that way because how it's come to age, paternity leave, these things. Or is it something that's like, no, that is what we should be focused on, because if we want long-term engagement, and we're in the age where organizations struggle so much with engagement, if we want long-term and devoted engagement, we better take note, because this is a big deal.
Yeah, I think, for my son now, he'll be 3 in August, and I can tell he wants more and more and more of my attention the older he's getting. And he will, Tyler, you've seen it. He'll try to break down this door behind me and want to play. Like, he wants to play with daddy. And in that article, Ryan, was it Ryan? The founder Strider Bicycles. He mentioned like he always kept his doors open. He did a little thing where it's very hands-on in these building things, and it can include his children, which I think is a beautiful thing. Where I'm in meetings and trying to focus, and I can't always have my son with me. And he said he always wanted to be inclusive and include his children in the business, in the dynamic, and understand that this is what daddy does. And that's one of the things I try to implement is when leaving the doors open when they can be open, and he'll come in and I'll turn my chair, be like, hey, what are you doing? And he'll come in, and I'm trying to get better at it because I'm not perfect at it by any stretch, but including them and trying to teach them about a little bit more about what I do, and that I need time to also focus, but I promise I'll go out and play with you and his toys and do those things. And then culturally, because I've had these conversations with young dads or soon to be dads, and also some older gentlemen. I'm like, how do I balance the pursuit of a career and the things and making sure my family's taken care of with my time, or if I decide to spend the time with the kids, right? And some are like, they won't remember it, right? And these are the ones I'm like, I don't know. They're getting to that age where this is the shit you remember, Daddy. He's like, well, from when they're first born to like 3, it's fine, and then that's when you really need to shift your time. And I'm like, I would, Tyler, I would think it's earlier than that.
Well,
right?
Hold on. I mean, we did a podcast. Thais Gibson, right? Remember the podcast we did with Thais? And Thais is a psychologist. She talks about attachment theory. And one of the things in our conversation that I brought up is how much of maybe an impact it had on me. One of my primal questions is, am I wanted? And share the circumstance where I lived with my aunt and uncle for about a month when I was under 2. And it's like, how much of that subconsciously is involved in some of my actions? And she's like, absolutely. And so it comes to this point is, do they remember or not? And I think the challenge is, and this is one of my thoughts, if she was here, like, all right, do, their reactions at 14, 15, 16, do they centralize back to the experiences they had at 2? And if it aligns, they believe that to be the case. And if it is different, then all of a sudden, maybe they advance and grow. And so my question to you, and my wife and I have been through it at times when our kids were younger. It's like, yes, we're trying to grow our business. We're trying to do those things. My wife will say, our kids became fluent in Spanish because they watched so much Dora. Right? Not really, but it's a great little comment. And it's, that is part of what happened with them as we were growing our network marketing businesses. We had the opportunity to do this, and it was on us. Right. It was on my wife as I was traveling doing my things. But let me interject and kind of bring some of this circle together, a few points, and then I want to share.
Yeah.
For the first 4 years of my youngest son's life, my son Landon, he was born when we first moved to Spokane. For the first 4 years of his life, I traveled 1 week a month, every single month, whether I wanted to or not. And about the end of that time, I realized I'd missed an entire year of his life.
Wow.
I'd missed a quarter of his life. I was gone. Whether it was him learning how to walk, whether it was him learning to speak, whether it was him, whatever. I'd missed an entire, that didn't count the hours that I was at home at night, but I was in an office from probably 6:30 until 4:00 at night, and then on call the rest of the time.
Right.
They didn't include that. That was, days that I was literally traveling. And I think of my friends that are, speakers or, salespeople, or territory managers, and they're on a plane every week. They're driving somewhere, spending nights away every week. And that is their life.
Yeah.
And I think about that, and that drove me to want to make a career change. When that really, said, hey, I want to leave those. I want to be more invested in my family and make it kind of our schedule rather than being demanded. But I also share this. I grew up on a farm.
Yeah.
I grew up on a farm, and my parents were never away. I worked with my parents. I would get up at 5:00 in the morning if I woke up, and where were my parents? They were out milking cows. And so I can remember being little and stumbling to the barn. Or my mom tells this story about how I was, 3 or 4, and I just decided to play Star Wars with a plant in our fire poker and destroy the plant. And I mean, that was just my life, what I was used to. Again, my parents were working. They weren't gone somewhere else. They were at our barn, which is, a few hundred yards away. But at the same point, I worked with my parents. I worked with them every day. I worked with my dad every day. And when I think now about the experience you talk about, Leaf walking in and the ability for him to work with you, right? When I was his age, I would be with my dad and we would be with cows.
Right.
We would be doing those things and I'd have that interaction with him. And even as I think about it now and those things, why do I have cows? Partly because of that gives me the opportunity and force to work with my kids, but I don't take advantage of it enough because it's hard. And so when I think about, as you pointed to Ryan McFarland, sharing this about inviting your kids into it.
Yeah.
And I think that does more for us as parents than it does for them in the moment, but it does more for them over their lifetime than we realize.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, sometimes I have to stop and reflect and just be aware of what is it my kids are asking me to do. Like they pretty much want my time. And then I think I'm like, I need to get to that thing on the computer to do for somebody. But okay, I don't need to do that right now. Like that can wait an hour. Let me play with him for 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I play with him and then I say, I have to go back. I have to finish something. And he's like, cool. Okay. It's when I say, no, not right now, and then do it. That's when I notice like he wants my attention more and
There's
more.
There's tension.
Yeah. It's like, but when I give it to him, and I think this is one of the things that I struggle with still is like finding that balance of like, now he needs my attention, or is he too attached to me? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because my parents, so myself growing up, my parents would both go to work, early in the morning, 8:00, they'd commute into New York. And I wouldn't see them till like 5 p.m. My grandma would be at the house and watch us. And like now, like I have a great relationship with my parents. I love them both and they're wonderful and great. And everything's fine. So now I'm like, is he getting too attached to daddy because I'm home all the time and available a lot? And is that good too?
Well, I mean, here's another part. He's 3.
Yeah.
Maybe in the next, year, we haven't talked about it. Does he start preschool?
Yeah.
Does he, when he starts kindergarten, when he starts going into those things, and all of a sudden there's his time away. Right. And, I'm at the age, point now, 2 of my kids drive. They're all 3 going to be in high school this fall. It's a totally different, like there have been times in the last month where my kids are all gone. It's just Kelly and I at home and we're like, this is kind of weird. It's come to that point and it's like wanting them to be around. And one of the things that I have wrestling with this because I've seen people do it wrong. I've had advisors say, don't get caught into chasing your career at the expense of your family. There's actually an organization, I'm going to promote it right now. This is not ad-based. There is no promotionary anything given, but John Vroman is a friend. He started a business called Front Row Dads. And the aim of Front Row Dads is to help men and support family men with businesses, not businessmen with families. It's the aim of the organization. My friend John Rulin told me about it. I ended up being involved in the organization for years now, great supporter of it. And it really is helping men that are struggling with that. Is it I just kind of have to endure my family as I'm being involved in the business, or should my focus be, man, I'm a family person first who happens to just be in business? And this is the challenge that we have so often, coming back to talking about starting a business, talking about paternity leave, and realizing the seasons of life. Yeah. One of the things that I've embraced, I've had conversations with one of my mentors, Mark Cole. Mark is the now owner, CEO of Maxwell Leadership Companies. And we've talked about this. And I've said the number one priority in my business life right now is to be present for my kids, to be around. And so does that mean I need to say no to some opportunities or limit some of the opportunities? Yeah. Do I need to limit potential speaking engagements, traveling engagements, those things? Yeah. I still need to make sure I do the things that fill me up and, fuel me, get me around people that I need to get around. You were at one of those events with me in March, to be in a room of people that not only help me grow, but also helped acknowledge the growth that I'm enduring. I think
Yeah.
you heard some of that. And it's like, okay, I'm going the right path, but I can't do that forsaking my kids. And we've discussed this. And he goes, Tyler, man, I didn't do this well. He has a daughter that just graduated high school. He's now an active parent for some of his grandchildren. And he's saying, I haven't always done that well, but man, I applaud you. And it's only because of his consideration and being able to talk that through that I'm able to actively make those decisions and know, could I be chasing things in a bigger way? Absolutely.
I got a question.
But then
for
the
you,
cost.
Yeah,
go ahead, Alex.
I was going to ask you, like, for the dads that are, because you mentioned that, like, going away a week at a time for every single month, right?
Yeah.
Putting in the work so that you can give the life to your children that they have now, right? You're like laying down this foundation to provide for your family, right? I'm guessing, right? Like, that's how I think about it. Like, I'm working so hard so I can give my kids this better life, and it's going to come at some costs. Do you regret that, or do you go, I'm happy I did it because we have the life we have now? Or is it like I could have done a little less and we still would have done well? Because I think that's one of the things that a lot of men probably struggle with, right? It's like, I want to be this provider. I want to, like, give up. I want to have a nice house and the best schools and programs. I can't give them that if I don't work at it.
It is a situational balance that every person needs to weigh. I don't think there's a prescription for everyone. Do Kelly and I regret the amount of work that we put in for a period of time? I don't think so at all, because of the fruit that it's given us. Was it taxing? Was it taxing on our relationship? Absolutely. Was it taxing on Kelly, who dealt with a lot of burnout and adrenal fatigue and all of those things? And I think a lot of that was a learning experience of not knowing better and seeking mentorship. And for me, like, seeking the mentorship of Mark to listen to my friends like John saying, hey, get involved here to help guide you there. I don't think Kelly had that, unfortunately. And I think a lot of women don't. We talked to Jess Ekstrom, podcast that released a month or so ago, and she shared much of that challenge. She just had her baby last week, her second. And just that challenge of being a mom and being the face of her business, much like my wife was. And like that challenge, I watched it. I've seen it.
Yeah.
I think the point that I'm at now is evolving through that to say, here's the great thing that, and I've read it. I think we've talked about it. I know this, my kids at this point would rather me be involved than say, we can go have another item.
Yeah.
The reality is most of the stuff that we have at our house, we have a pool, we have a sport court, we have a big, like, half-acre sports field. It doesn't get used. It doesn't at all. My kids really don't care. As much as they love some of it, it's great to have. And I look at it, and even when we talked about this as a family the other day, is it worth having some of this stuff? It's nice. It's great. But I think often we find that all of the toys, all the things that we have make us feel good about ourselves.
Right.
But we really don't use. And I think that's a challenge that we constantly have to seek advice, seek mentorship, ask peers and say, hey, what's really important? And the things that if my kids were here and they were open on it, I think they would say, we're glad that you guys have been present because you've been involved in our lives through coaching, we appreciate that. And we appreciate some of the trips and experiences we've had. And they've talked about that. And when it comes to some of the other things, if we had to redo and maybe not, pursue as much or be gone as much as they've gotten older, I think now that it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
So,
yeah. No, that's a good point. Yeah, that's one of the things that I think about too, is making sure that if I'm traveling, when I get back, I give him a lot of attention. I give my kids a lot of attention, and we go adventuring, right? We always go outside, especially on the late afternoons, on the weekends, just try to go fishing, and do things outdoors. And activities, right, outside of the house. And it seems like he always enjoys those the most. He's so, curious. And those are the things that you're right. Because those are things I remember,
Yeah.
my dad doing me is like, he taking me fishing. He coached my little league teams. Like, those are the things I remember. I'm like, oh, like I remember how present he was. I just want to make sure I do those things. But yeah, that's, being a newer dad, that I think about a lot, and balancing, I want to provide and do those things for my family as well.
Before we wrap up, I want to talk about two things. The one is going back to the paternity leave subject. I have an interesting story. We'll get to that. But first off, I think one thing that isn't discussed here that is most important. You've been on an active campaign the last couple of weeks to change your health. And I think one of the things that was a driver for me, where, and it's been, life is a roller coaster, right? There's times where, I can remember I'd get home from work before I made a, concerted effort back into my health. And I would get home from sitting in an office. It was, one of my non-travel weeks, and I'd just sit down on the couch and I was exhausted. And meanwhile, Kelly was exhausted from chasing 3 little kids, probably 4 and under at that point.
Oh,
and I realized that I needed to change my health. I needed to, because they deserved better. And there's that challenge often as a young parent, as a parent of young kids. It's like, do I take care of myself? Do I go work out? Do I eat well? Or do I devote all of that time to my kids? Do I go to the gym and put my kids in, childcare for an hour? Is that something wrong? It's like, that was one of the best decisions I ever made, because putting that priority of my health forward and being selfish there. And much of it came from my experience. My dad was a college athlete. He was a hard worker. I mean, I don't know a day, growing up that he wasn't up at 5 o'clock and not done until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. That was just our life as a farmer, as someone having another business. But he wasn't healthy. He wasn't healthy in the fact that he was overweight. And if I wanted to go play basketball, if I wanted to go throw a ball, if I wanted to go play, he was either too tired, too busy because all of the business stuff, or just unable to do that. I think about my dad now, who, is 70. He'll be 74 here in a couple of weeks, and he's decent health, but he's still overweight. If we wanted to go on a hike, if we wanted to go do something active, he wouldn't be able to do it. And when the driver for me to say, why do I work out every morning? Why do I try to have a handle on my health, is in order that I can be that dad for my kids. And has there been challenges with some, tendonitis, some, back pain? Yeah, of course. But it's not because I have a major limitation where it is this restriction from a health point of view. And I think that is something that, when we talk about this idea of dads, when we talk about this idea of parents, you can sit and say, oh, I'm healthy enough. I'm healthier than most people my age. But are you healthy for the long-term benefit of your kids and your family? And that's a much different question.
Oh, and so for those, listening, 3 weeks ago, I went on isogenics, and Tyler suggested, and I love it. It's been amazing. I have more energy. I'm cutting back that pounds because I was one of the, college athlete, but I went overweight. I was like 221 pounds, which is probably like 25 to 30 pounds off my normal weight, what I weighed.
Yeah.
And since I had kids, I've only gained weight. I would snack and eat, and, you're running around trying to change diapers and work. And I was not taking care of my diet and my exercise. And I would feel sluggish throughout the day. I'd put in a lot of energy and effort, but I could tell, I'm feeling tired midday. I feel like I could just be more and do more, and I'm not a young guy, but I'm just gaining way too much weight. I'm not taking care of myself. So 3 weeks ago, I changed my diet, eating much better now, and I feel so much more energy. And it's like, how do I explain this? It's like these little things that in your mind, you're like, oh wait, I can do that. Like, that's not like before. It's so weird. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the food. If you're consuming a lot of junk food and snacks, like your brain almost tells you subconsciously or consciously, like, no, I can't do it because you're tired or just like you have this like sluggish. And then when you switch your diet up, for someone, your brain's like, no, you can do that. That's easy. Like, you can jump in the pool right now and get wet and swim, even though you don't have a bathing suit on, and you just walk right home. Like that's like the situation. Like before, I was like, no, I got to change and do this couple extra steps, and now I'm like, no, I can do it. It's so weird. It's just because of that diet and changing nutrients going to your body that you can do more and be more present with the kids. Like I noticed that.
Love it.
Just these last.
Love it. Yeah, that is something that's been a part of my life now for, really actively for almost 20 years, but there was ebbs and flows and a major focus the last 13. So I want to then talk about paternity leave. And I'm going to ask you this question. The organizations you've been a part of, when you were a part of them, because you've been on your own, had your own consulting business for how long now?
I had my own company for almost 5 years in consulting now so like 8 years I've been on my own. I have not worked for a company. In
so before that, did the organizations have paternity leave that you knew?
I want to, when I worked at CNBC, yes, they had paternity leave. Cheddar, they did. Yes. ABC News, ABC Disney. I mean, I was so young at those times. I don't even know if I was thinking about those things. I want to say yes, they did.
Okay.
But I don't. I was young. I was like 24. I would say a lot of the media that I worked in had it, but
he says, but
yeah. But I noticed like the moms would take the time, and because they're going through a lot more. That's also,
I would say, a societal expectation.
Yeah. You're right. It's probably societal. And then I would notice, a lot of the dads would be coming back to work much sooner, or always be like, they'd be in the meetings, right? They'd show up in a meeting when you're just like, wait, I thought you just had a kid. Like, I thought you're off. It's like, no, I'm good. I can jump into this meeting.
Yeah. Well, one of the articles, Tim Allen talks about that. He shares the difficulty and, so many men not taking advantage of the paternity leave. And paternity leave is fairly new, right? It's a newer, when I organizationally worked, and it's been 18 years since I have, I had a couple of years, it hasn't been a part of the benefit package.
Yeah.
And I think there's as much a challenge in the expectations of, and I'm going to share a story. I'm going to share a story about my brother-in-law. So my brother-in-law has his first son. He was born the first year. And my brother-in-law worked for a company, and the part of the job that he took care of was he was solely in charge of. He was pretty much the only one there. He ran kind of a sales part of that business. And the expectation was knowing that he was going to take some paternity leave. And between the business owner and himself, there was a little bit of a disparity between what the expectation was. He was the only one running this sales business. And, the expectation from, I think, the business owner is like, hey, I had 5 kids. I never took paternity leave. I've owned my own business. I don't get this, but I understand it's new. It's what it is. I expect you to still be engaged because someone has to run this.
Right.
And whatever my brother-in-law chose to do was not up to par. And there ended up being a major discussion, and whether my brother-in-law left or he got fired, not sure, but he's no longer working for that business.
Wow.
And I think that is more common than uncommon.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that it leads to someone being fired or leaving, but it comes to this, hey, I understand you want to take your paternity leave. It's kind of been this, again, millennial driven. It's newer, right? It's not something that's been around for generations. It's not something that I, as a young father in a Gen X corporate world, ever had. And it's this newer, kind of benefit package. And I think the challenge here is you have leaders that never experienced it themselves or understand or having this conversation we're having, that are then, as part of the leadership, saying, are we embracing this or are we scoffing it? Because so often, I think in one of the individuals that we read pointed to, they scoff at it. And it becomes this pressure, like you just shared. The guy's like, hey, I thought you were on paternity leave. He's like, no, I'm good. I'm here.
Yeah. I think it's it's like unspoken. Like no one, I think now, 2024, it's pretty prevalent. Like a lot of organizations have this, but it's this like unspoken.
Well, in some states it's a requirement. You have to.
Right.
State of Washington, I believe it's a requirement.
Yeah, and most states, I think, and it's just this unspoken
and paid.
Yeah, and it's paid, but
that's the challenge.
Yeah, and they still don't take it. They feel like it's going to affect my performance review. It's going to affect my path and trajectory to become, a higher level executive and getting that bonus. Hey, John came to work even though this, did you see that effort and time you put in?
The dedication, the loyalty, right. the commitment, like he's all in as opposed to the person that takes the time. Because here's another factor. Right. I haven't run my own business, right? We haven't had a situation where any of our employees have, been in this case where paternity or maternity leave. But when you stop and think about it, it's like, okay, 12 weeks. That is roughly, a quarter of someone's annual salary, roughly. Okay. How many businesses have the margin, especially smaller businesses, to absorb that expense? And so from a challenge, I get it, where it's really hard. When I think back myself, I didn't have the ability to absorb, in my mind, a day.
Yeah.
I had a day. I didn't like that pressure. And so here's why I'm spotlighting this, because the pressure is real.
Yeah.
It's not imagined. It's not made up. And if you and I are sitting here and we're talking about, Pete, Pete works for us, right? We own a business. Pete works for us, and Pete just had a baby. And we're thinking about, all right, Pete's job. Now we have to figure out how to make up his job. And we know that he's going to be gone for 12 weeks. And we're looking at our bottom line, and our bottom line is razor thin. And it's like, we can't hire somebody else. We can't bring in a tech because we don't have any money to do it. So that means you and I have to figure out how to get it done. Or the expectation from him was, hey, for 12 weeks, you better do extra work because we can't go without you.
Right.
So how the expense on personal capital and financial capital is real.
And I think it is having that awareness of understanding the situation, right? If you work for one of these big conglomerates and big corporations that can absorb a 12-week paid, paternity leave, do take advantage of that. I do think it's really important if you have that ability. But at the same time, if you're not, and you work for yourself or a small business, it's knowing, hey, I want to be a family man first. And there's time I want to put into my children and my wife, but there's also time I need to put into the business. And having this balance as best you can and not beating yourself up over it, but that cognition, the awareness that like, I know this is going to be a little hard on me, it may be a little tough, but I want to give both. I can give time to both, it will be okay.
And I think the great summary here is the time invested with your kids will never be a bad investment. And the challenge at times is weighing that. I did a podcast just last week with a good friend, Jordan Montgomery, and he has a book coming out the end of July. It's called The Art of Encouragement. We'll have that podcast out in a couple of weeks. And he shares a story where he booked a speaking engagement. And he booked it, and he was returning home on his daughter's birthday. And, he was going to be home in time in order to go to dinner with the family and everything. And then ended up being a travel issue, and he didn't get home that day. And he shares about in the book just how that hurt her, how that hurt him, how that, he gets home the next day and he's talking to her and he's like, well, is it the best birthday ever? And he goes, no, you weren't here.
Yeah.
And I think from those experiences, we shared an experience in my life when my daughter was little and she had a dance recital and I didn't make it. And I still remember about that. And we talked about Alex Hormozy saying, put in the work and miss the dance recital. It's really hard to say. Jordan has dance daughters, and he and I talk about it. It's really easy to say when you don't have kids in that situation. And when you do, it really comes down to it's like, they will remember. That does
They
impact
will.
them, because are you choosing to say work is more important than your kid? And the day you say that the work is more important than your kid, in my opinion, you got your priorities way out of balance.
Yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree. I know I always remember that stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it's
I mean,
it sticks with you.
yeah, it does. So any final thoughts you want to wrap up with, Alex?
No, just I'm excited for the event and July Impact Driven Summit in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, with John Maxwell, and you mentioned a bunch of others. So excited to see you there.
Well, I'm excited. I think I shared this with you a little earlier. I'm excited because, man, the time I spend with John is some of the most meaningful time in my life. I've had opportunity to spend weeks with him, a trip to Israel, and just the amount of encouragement and belief he pours into you. I'm excited to be around people like you. I'm excited to be around people like Graham Cochran, Jake Thompson, Katie Casada, because they make me better. And they fill my cup to where I can be a more present, a more meaningful dad. And so I know, just for me, selfishly, I'm going to get so much from the event, so much, to be able to sit at their feet and learn. Man, I am beyond excited. It's like, to put those four in a room, dude, that's pretty awesome. And the amount of lessons to learn, I'm excited about.
Yeah, no, I feel the same way. Just grateful for the opportunity to spend that time with these people in an intimate setting. You don't get that a lot in life, and take advantage of it. So appreciate it, man.
All right. Well, for everyone that's watching, listening, thanks for being here, whether it's live on LinkedIn, or watching the replay broadcasted on YouTube. Thanks for being here. Until next time, choose to lead with impact.